Over the last year on this channel, we have discussed a lot of bad scientists. Some of them historical, some of them more recent. And so by covering all these different stories, I have learned about many different ways to catch a bad scientist. And I thought I would synthesize all of that knowledge into this video today. So in today's video, I want to share with you 5 ways to catch a bad scientist, going from the easiest and most obvious red flags through to the more labor intensive and tough stuff. So let's start off with the easiest one of them all, which is publication rate. So when I talk about publication rate, I'm talking about how many papers can an academic publish in a given year. And the reason why I was thinking about this is because this week I was tagged in a LinkedIn post by this guy called Timo Mandler, who surveyed his followers to see how many papers a scientist can publish in a year before it gets suspicious. And the majority of his followers felt that just 10 plus publications a year is already suspicious. Now, I replicated that poll with you guys on this channel, and you guys also agreed that in general, 10 plus publications a year is suspicious. Now, I know a lot of you will be thinking, well, surely it depends on the field, different fields have different rates of publication, which is true, you're absolutely right. But just take a look at this table here. This is an image posted by the X account Publishing with Integrity, which according to them, at the time of filming, 6 months into 2024, there have been over 22 people with over 200 papers published already this year. That works out to be over 1 paper per day, and if you exclude weekends, so only include working days, that means that these people are publishing around 1.8 papers per working day, with this top person publishing over 2 papers per working day. Now, I don't care what field you're from, but that rate of publication is absolutely impossible. In my mind, the people who are publishing papers at this rate, it's like that meme from Parks and Rec, right to jail, no trial, right to jail.
Right to jail, right away. No trial, no nothing.
And those are just the people publishing over 200 papers. Most of you guys felt that just 10 papers a year is already suspicious. So all authors, all academics who are publishing more than 10 papers a year should immediately be put under some kind of investigation, in my opinion. But there just isn't the manpower or the infrastructure of people doing this kind of work, unfortunately. So a lot of these people who are publishing an impossible amount of work are just going to get away with it scot-free. Okay, the second easiest way to spot a bad scientist is to look for conflicts of interest. In many of the dodgy studies that we've analysed on this channel, the authors had egregious conflicts of interest. Take, for example, the PACE trial that we looked at a few weeks ago, where the author's study was funded by the Department of Work and Pensions, which clearly had a conflict of interest in not wanting to give patients of ME disability benefits, which is exactly what the results of this study would impact. Or as another example, look at that original autism vaccine study, where Andrew Wakefield, the author of that study, had a direct conflict of interest because he held a patent for a rival vaccine. A lot of the time, conflicts of interest result in poor quality work, and you can't always rely on the declared conflicts of interest that are published on people's papers. From what I've seen, there aren't enough checks and balances in that process to make sure that any true conflicts of interest are actually recorded on the published manuscript. People can simply just not declare the conflict of interest, and a lot of the time they get away with it. Okay, but if they're not producing a ridiculous amount of papers and they have no declared conflicts of interest, then how do you know who to look at? Well, that brings us on to our third way of identifying a dodgy scientist, which is to look at consistently surprising results. Scientists and academics are incentivized to produce surprising results from their research. Surprising and interesting results are a lot more likely to be published in high-impact journals like Nature or Science. If your paper gets published in a high-impact journal like that, then you're also more likely to get a lot of press coverage. Press coverage might lead to more citations on your work, or just more work in general coming to you because of this research. And so there's a lot of fame and money to be gained from producing surprising results. But the thing that makes results surprising is that they're rare and they're counterintuitive. And occasionally these things do happen in science, right? By nature they have to. But if there's a researcher who somehow is able to consistently produce surprising results year after year, paper after paper, then you have to start looking at their portfolio and thinking, is there something more dodgy going on here? By its nature, nobody should be able to consistently find surprising results from their work. We saw an example of this from Jan Henrik Schön, one of the most notorious academic fraudsters in physics. He was able to produce supposed lab results that were theoretically perfect in terms of the output that he was getting and the measures that he was getting, which is obviously really surprising, especially because so many people were trying to do the same thing for many years and couldn't. And yet he was able to do it not only in one domain, but across many different domains of physics. When a scientist scientists or academics' results are too perfect and consistently so, it's quite likely the case that it's too good to be true. Okay, so number 4 is a little bit harder, and that is image manipulation. We particularly see this kind of thing happening in biological science. The work of Elizabeth Bick, which we've talked about extensively on this channel, shows how common this practice is. Image manipulation happens with techniques like Western blot, where people are trying to show their blots to be, looking better than they really are. Or they use image manipulation when looking at like cross sections of cells or cells under the microscope, things like that. The easiest way to catch these people is through software. So Elizabeth Bick talked to me about different software like
ImageTwin and Proofik to help me find these duplications. And ImageTwin has a database of images, so you can sometimes find duplications of an image within one paper with another paper. So everything in nature, more or less, making a generalization here, is unique. 2 leaves are never identical. 2 rocks are always slightly different. And so if you think about cells or tissues or Western blots, the patterns that you see there might be similar, but they're not supposed to be identical.
Now, of course, with the new emergence of AI-based image generators, this is going to become a much harder challenge going forward, because people won't only be duplicating images, but generating totally new images that are fake. As a first step, I think that the duplication image software should just be standard practice across any journal that has images as part of its publications. But I would love to see new tools and software developed that can counter AI-generated content. And the 5th and final way that I want to talk to you about catching a bad scientist is through thorough investigation of somebody's research data. This is by far the most labor-intensive and most specialist way of catching somebody out when they're doing bad research. This is the analysis that Data Colada has done against Francesca Gino, as well as a number of other authors that they've talked about on their blog. The way this is done is by going into a scientist's data set, analyzing the data in the way that they claim to have done in their paper, and seeing if you can produce the same results. Also, by looking at their data set, you can look for anomalies in the way that the data is being processed, or if certain numbers look out of place or unreasonable. But it certainly does take someone's time and effort in order to find these things, because you do need quite good specific knowledge in order to be able to counter this problem. Now, I don't see why a software solution can't be developed that can at least do a first sweep of many different data sets to see if certain things look out of place and should be flagged, that can be done in an automated way, or at least a much faster way than someone manually going through someone's data set. That certainly seems like something which is possible. Now, of course, the other problem with this is that a lot of the time when papers are published, the original dataset doesn't get published along with it. You'll often see papers published with this silly comment at the bottom saying data available upon request, which is the biggest lie in all of science. The data is not available if that's what it says. In my opinion, all journals, or at least all the well-known, well-established journals, should have a standard practice of every paper that they publish to have the original dataset published along with it. That is the first and most important step that is needed in order to establish more transparency between the scientists and the rest of the scientific community. Those are 5 ways to catch a bad scientist. Do you agree or disagree with me on any of these points? Are there any ways of catching a bad scientist that I missed in this video? If so, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers and I would love to get there. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.